Hi, I'm Jillybean Fitzhenry, and this project, Majestic Bald Eagle, was originally taught as a Zoom class. The pattern packet with instructions, pattern, and step-by-step photos is available on my website, jillybean.net, as well as all the brushes. Hope you enjoy. So what we're going to start with, and if you have your step by step printed out, we're going to want to fill in the beak and the eye with white. Okay, so I'm going to just take some white and just fill in. I got mine a little wider than what it needed to be. I'm going to just quickly skim off a little bit here. So I'm just taking a clean angle brush and just cropping off some of that white. And I'm not too worried because I can always put more color under there. I got a little wider than what I wanted. Now once you've got that dry, you can go ahead and fill in those areas with yellow. Now I like a yellow that has just a little tiny touch of orange in it. So this is Indian yellow in Traditions. Let's see what the other options are. We've got, you could use Derylide yellow in the Fluid Media. You could use golden yellow with just a touch of some red in it, or an orange. So it's basically, it's yellow and just put a tiny touch of orange in it so that it's a little bit warmer, because that way our highlights are going to show up better. Anything close is going to be fine. And I'm not worried about, you know, the background around these areas, because I'll probably later take my angle brush and float a little color, you know, next to the eagle to help make the head pop a little bit more. Now our next step is in photo number 2 here. You're going to see where I've put highlights on the eye and on the beak. And this is mixing yellow and white 1-to-1. Okay, so whatever you used on your beak is fine, and then you're going to mix some white into it, equal parts. Now when I'm working on this, you have several ways of putting this, blending this color. I'm going to show you one way of doing it where I'm going to lay it in with a number 2 round, and then I'm going to use just water on the brush on the number 6 round to soften the edges. Another option would be some of the areas you'd be able to do a corner load float, but you'd have to switch to a smaller brush. Or another way is to use a blender brush, or even a little mezzaluna brush would work as well. So I'm going to get some yellow and some white. Okay, now I had mixed my yellow to begin with, so I want to make sure I mix this too. And I want more white here. Okay, so you want a real pale yellow is what you're going for. Okay, I'm going to put a little drop of water in there. Okay, and then just kind of wipe the extra off the brush. All right, and I'm going to start with that. Okay, so for on the beak, I'm going to start this top section right here, and I'm going to lay it in nice and solid. to about there. Then I'll switch to my number 6 round, and I'm just going to catch that bottom edge with the clean brush and soften it. Just kind of pat it in. Okay, and that's how I'm going to do all the different areas. So I want to get some across the top of the beak here too. So I'm going to lay it in, switch to my round brush, just make sure that it's clean again, and I'm just going to catch that edge. It's like I'm using the tip of the brush to erase that edge. Just gentle, gentle touch. And clean your big brush often. Okay, I also want to make this bolder right about there. So I lay it in nice and solid, and then just use the tip of my round brush to just gently kind of erase the hard line. But I don't want to remove the color in the middle, so I'm trying not to let my big brush go in the middle of my paint area, only around. So if that's awkward, try switching to a dome brush or even like the Mezzaluna brush to do your blending on your edge. There's always more than one way to get the same effect. You just got to find something that works for you. Okay, I want the beak to be brighter down on the tip. So I'm going to lay in some nice bold color at the bottom tip. And they really have a sharp, it really, makes such a dramatic turn. And then just soften where I stopped with that color. There was all along separating the beak here. Now there's a really hard ridge above and below where the opening of the mouth is. And so I'm going to make kind of a fat line. Okay, now I'm not going to blend the bottom one. I want to leave separation in there. And I'm just carefully, just a little edge off that top, but leave the bottom one because we're going to put some white in there afterwards. I want to make sure that I got nice and bold where it curves around the opening of the mouth there too. Okay, and then there was just a little, on the reference photo I had, there was just a little spot right there that was catching some shine. So I made another little circle and then just kind of softened the edges there. Now, if you got too carried away or too much of any color, a couple things you can try. Sometimes you can try just water to remove. See how I can push back that highlight if I needed to, if I came too far into the beak, just using water on the brush. Or I could have put some more of the original yellow back on. But I always try just water first, see if that'll work. Okay, and we use the same color in the eye. So in the eye, we're going to put it in that lower left corner, nice and bold, and then just take your clean brush and gently soften the edge. And the stripe under the eye, you're just putting it right in the center, so a thinner line right in the middle. And you may not even need to soften that. Now, if you lose the yellow above and below that highlight, take a little liner brush and put it back in. So if I got too carried away, I can come back with my original color and I can just outline above and below so that I have that highlight stays in the center. I still want to see my original yellow color above and below that highlight. So if you have to put it back in with a liner, you can. All right, so we've got our first highlight on here. Now we're going to do the third step is going to be to brighten our highlight with some white, and then we're going to start kind of sketching in little areas of the eye with some washes of black. And you'll see that it's really, really transparent, that we're going to be using it very, very, very soft. So you want some white and some black for your next colors. I'm going to stick with my smaller round brush for now. And I think what I'll do is I'll start with the shading first. So I'm going to get a little bit of black, and I really want to water this down. I want it real transparent. I'd rather have to go back and deepen it than to start out too dark. So very, very transparent, lots of water. I'll use my little round brush. Okay, so I want to kind of get my eye sketched in here, and I'm going to put my photo right next to it. I think it makes it easier. So if you have yours printed out, go ahead, put it right next to it. So I'm going to kind of fill in, and I'm just going to kind of dab it, going around the underside of that eye, and then kind of creating some corners on each side. And I'll use it to do the top line, but I'll make it kind of feathery, so it'll blend into the feathers a little bit more after. It's not eyelashes, it's just going to help it blend in. Okay, now the flatter you make the top of the eye, the more it's going to look like he's really focused, intense. Okay, now I got a little further into my yellow than I want, so I'm taking just water on my other brush and removing it. So if you get into your eyeball, just take some water on your other brush and just lift it away. It's really kind of cool that you can do that. Okay, and then I want to get just pale underneath the eye also, or under that strip. And I'm just going to kind of tap that in. I don't want it to be a nice solid line. There's like a lot of texture, little teeny feathers underneath that area there, and just kind of tap it in a little bit more into a triangle coming out away from the eye. If you get too bold, just take some water and lift some away. Okay, and then the pupil is round. So I'm going to put in a wash of black for the pupil as well. Okay, now the bigger you make a pupil, the more innocent looking an eye will be. The smaller, the more intense or devious. And I got to tell you, these guys really do have a very intense stare, and we'll be pulling some of the fur down over the eye after, and so it will give him a little bit more of a hooded look to his eye. I want to just sketch in on the beak after too, but just, you know, just kind of dab Even use your finger to blot if you need to under that eye there. The intenseness of the eye will change after we get more done. It was just the first little steps. Okay, so then in the beak, I just use this, and if you need to switch to a liner, you sure could, but my little round brush has a great point on it. Now I'm going to pull in a curve as I outline that, because I did notice that it has a little bit wider area right in the middle there, and I just kind of sketching that in. Same with the opening of the mouth. Still just using the black and just kind of sketch in. Okay, and then inside the beak, it looks like a little comma stroke. It's like a little opening for the nostril. And I want to just kind of draw that comma stroke, but then I want to soften that left edge. So I'll get that in there, and then I take my other brush and I want to soften that edge to the left so that it kind of fades. Now, I could have done that with a little brush and do a float. It'd be the same thing. A little bolder on the right side and then fade into the left side. Okay, and then all the white areas that I did originally, or the highlight areas, I'm sorry, now I want to put white on it. And pop that up. I want to do it in smaller areas now. So the very top of that section, I'm going to put the white and then soften it with a little round brush, with a watery brush. Top edge of the beak. And soften with the clean. So we're on photo number 3. And I want the very tip of the beak. And just soften that edge. Okay, and I've got, let's see, there's a little bit inside the top there too. And then just soften around the edges. And then that hard ridge that goes around his mouth, I want a thinner line inside that original highlight. There again, if you need to switch to a liner, you sure can. And only if you get a really, really hard area am I going to soften. Otherwise, I kind of want to leave it a little bit bold so that it pops out. Okay, and then the eye, it's a little bit of white in the very center bottom. I'm not going to go all the way across this time. Very center bottom of both the eye and the ridge under the eye. And you probably don't even need to blend that. So right in the center of the line under the eye, and then some white in that bottom corner of the eye. Okay, then you're going to need, the next step that we're going to do is we're going to actually tint some orange on the underside of the mouth or the beak and a tiny bit on the outer edge of the beak, also in the eye. So find an orange, let's see, what did I use originally? I think I'll use, I'm going to use a little bit of vermilion in the fluid media. So the vermilion I've got here, but I could also use the cadmium orange. Either of those are going to work. So Americana would be scarlet. Traditions would be Paranon orange. Or you can, mix a little bit of orange with a touch of red in it. And in this beak area, under the mouth, and I'm going to really get that front corner filled in. I want to pull some under and in mouth area. So take a look at this before I blend it. So look up at your screen just a second. And then I'm going to take my watery brush and just soften that. I didn't go all the way across, just keeping it more to the front third. I want it bolder right in that front corner. So I'll put a little bit more on there. And I want just a hint on the outer edge of the beak on the left side there. I'm not going to go all the way down. And then I'll soften that with the tip of my clean brush. It's kind of like I outlined it and then softened the outline. It'll just help it pop, give it a little bit more color. And if I get too much, in that ridge, I just take water on my clean brush and pull it or lift it back out again. Okay, and I also want to put the orange. I'm going to put it kind of like in that top right corner. And then just soften my starting and stopping points. You just kind of dab it with your clean brush. Because it's okay if it has a little bit of texture. Okay. One more thing, I see that I had a little bit of I added after I did that nostril, I added a little bit of a white highlight right on the other side of that nostril. It was catching just a little bit of shine. Okay. Then I want to clean up my area here where the beak is, so I'm going to use a little bit of white and put it on just almost like an outline. And I want to put that, in fact, you could just outline it with your liner brush if you want. But I want to clean up that edge to make sure it looks like it's going on top of that other area. Pull that white right down into the tip. It's amazing when you're on camera and you've got this blown up on your screen, you see a lot more of the imperfections than what you see when you're just sitting here painting. There we go. So really clean up that edge. See if you need to do any other little touch-ups. Anything that you may have messed into, maybe didn't get bright enough. One more thing I want to do with my black is on this lower part of the beak, the little feathers actually do come right on top and kind of attach. So I've got to really, really water that down. But I want to tap in, coming from the eye. I'm almost kind of filling in that little area, just a little bit onto the beak there. And the lower part, and let's go a little bit under, kind of around the edge of the beak there. Just kind of tap it in, just the little tip of your brush. We're not making feathers, we just want to get some shadow. And then make sure that you also have some of this coming out to the right side, because when we put the white on, it'll make a difference. And just kind of tap it in, don't smooth it out. You want that texture. And then I am going to switch to a liner brush and possibly even your rake brush to do more of the eye area. Now, one thing I do like to do with the rake brush sometimes, if I'm working on something smaller, I will actually trim it because otherwise I'm trying to do a corner load. So you can actually take like the 1/4 inch and you can chop off with the scissors just right at the base, chop off some on each side, and you can make yourself a smaller rake brush. Because especially if you're working on ornaments and things, it's nice to have that little smaller brush to work with. But I can also just use the corner of my brush for doing smaller detail as well. Okay, so now on the eagle, we're going to just do this white area around the eye. I don't want to do the whole head. I want to frame that eye in, so I want to do that separate from the rest of the head. So I am going to use my rake brush, and if you'll see, I'm using it a little bit more at the chisel instead of pulling the whole flat thing out, which I would get a great big wide stroke. I'm just going to be grabbing with the tips a little bit to surround that eye and where the beak is. Okay, so I'm going to be using white paint. I do need to put a little bit of water in it or it's not going to come off the brush. But I don't want it super transparent either. So you got to find, you want it fluid, but still have some pigment in there. Okay, so I think it's better to test it rather than right on the eye. Let's test it like down below on the beak. That'd be an easier place to fix. So I'm just gonna kind of tap in little fuzzy, so I'm not pulling strokes, I'm just kind of using the tips to tap in little fuzzy hair or feathers to get that texture next to the beak itself. And also under the eye, I'm going to tap in right next to the eye, and you can go, you know, right up to the yellow almost. Okay, and tap in next to the beak. Okay, so far all I've done is tapped in little tips. And if we have to add another coat after, we won't know until it dries. So we can always come back, get some more. But I don't want to totally cover up all my shadow. I want to be able to see some of my shadow. Okay, then I can start pulling the little hairs above. Now I want to come over the eye when I do this because I want him to look like he's really intensely staring at something. So I'm catching that top part of the eye and I'm just pulling little strokes. And the same with under the eye, but I don't want to lose all my shadow under there, and I will come back and put more shadow. But just kind of pulling out little strokes, and then eventually the feathers in the rest of the head will blend into this. But okay, and then the shadow's going to help pull it back together a little more. He looks kind of scruffy right now, but we'll get him fixed. Now, I know that I just used black. I almost feel like I need a little touch of burnt umber in there. I'm gonna mix some black and some burnt umber for the next step, I think. I want burnt umber with just a touch of black in it. There again, you don't need much color. So I have some burnt umber, and then I'm going to put just a little touch of black in there. I want more burnt umber than black. And water that down. Okay, and I'm going to have my big round brush handy for blending if I need to. Okay, so now I want to create more of a hooded look. So underneath the eye there, I want to intensify that little corner. So I'm going to tap some more into that corner. And then I'm going to use my round brush to just kind of pull some of that in to the darker areas. But I want to keep that yellow. So what I've done is I've kind of softened and darkened that strip that's under the eye in that top corner here. But then I'll take my clean brush and make sure that I haven't lost, you know, all the yellow in there. So kind of wipe out some as I get too much in there. So I want to deepen both of the corners, and I'm going to come back with some more white after, but I need a little bit more of a hooded look. So I'm coming back with some of this darker burnt umber lines. And then in the back corner, I also want this to be dark. So really look at your photo number 5. Put that right next to your painting so you can see this darker area. Okay, now as I go across there again, I want to make sure that I'm kind of shading, you know, a little bit of the top of that eye there with this darker brown. That's what's going to give them a little bit more of an evil look. And they really do have a very intense look, but they're so beautiful. As long as they don't come pick up my little dog. Every once in a while I see some flying over my house. So a little wash but then soften it. Okay. Now it looks like I gave it a little bit more of a kind of an angle back here. I'm going to lift this up. I'm going to come back with some more white, but I made it a little bit more abrupt in that back corner, so I'm going to do that again. Kind of like the shape of that. You know, don't be afraid to pull this out because we're going to pull more white on top of this again. But I want to get all that darkness in there. And I'm not really worried about blending the outer edges because I know the white is going to come on top of it again. Check and see if you need a little bit more. I feel like I lost some of my shadow under my yellow ridge, so I'm going to put a little bit more of an outline back in there too. And just kind of soften that. If I take out too much of the yellow, there again, take a wet brush, lift it back out. Okay, so I think I'll leave that, and then this time I'm just going to use a liner brush because I want to make sure that I get my white a little bit more controlled. So I'm going to thin down some white on with my script or liner. Any little brush, 5/0, 10/0, 20/0. And I like the longer ones just because they hold more paint. Okay, now I want to come and get some individual little lines breaking up the top edge of that shadow, but I don't want to lose all the shadow. And I'm kind of curving it to the back. I still want to be able to see some shadow, but I want a really kind of a ridge, a hooded ridge, so that it makes it look like his eye is sinking down under that. Now be careful of this bottom corner. You only want to break up the outer part of that brown or black. You don't want to go all the way up next to the eye with your white because you need that shadow under the eye. So that little corner there. And if you do, just come back with some more of that color in there. I'll make sure I get more white in the front corner here. I want this area to pop. So it makes it look like it's a heavier lid, heavier eyelid. So I need that front top corner a little bolder. And this back corner a little bolder. And I feel I need to touch up my white in that yellow one more time. Okay, now I think I'll leave the eye alone. I can always change it after I get the rest of the head done. I can take another look and see how it looks compared to the rest. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it for now. Okay, and then it just needs one last little highlight in the pupil. If you see, it can be a little square or a little dot, but it needs to be a transparent white. And actually, I've found that I'm starting to like doing a square rather than a a circle for my highlight, and I have it a little bit on the pupil and a little bit on the iris area. Lunch break. Okay, so now we're on to step number 6. We're gonna do, I think, mainly just kind of work on the head, and we're gonna save the other feathers for this afternoon. So on the head, what I want to do is I want to finish getting all the white feathers in the head, and then we're going to be able to get that whole face kind of pulled together. So lots of white paint again, and we're going to be using our rake brush. The one thing is, let me zoom out just a little bit now. If the color behind or inside of our head is too pale, the problem with that is the white doesn't pop. So take a look at mine. I want a little bit more darkness in mine, okay? Because I feel the white is not going to show up enough if I don't. So I'm actually going to add one more step to mine. I'm going to add some, I'm just going to get, I think, some of the blue in there. Let's see what I got here handy. Any kind of blue. Let's try a little phthalo blue. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, and I'll just use my rake brush, but I want to get some more color in there, and I could maybe add some of the other. Okay, so as long as I'm putting in feathers, I might as well just kind of go in the direction that the feathers are going to flow. And I'm just putting in some really rough strokes of color just to get some more darkness in that head, because I want that white to show up. So I'm not being real careful here. I just want patches of color a little bit darker than what I had. So, and it could be any color. I mean, I could have even done purple. I could do the pink. I can do the blue, but I'm just gonna pull it. If you notice, it comes from the beak and it rotates around the head. So it all kind of rotates when you're pulling those strokes, and that'll be the same when we add the white in there, but I just need this to be a little bit darker than what I had it. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get some of the magenta in there too, just because I want there to be color in his head. So I'm going to do a little bit of this with some of the magenta too, just to get a variety. It'll kind of be a little bit purpley, and all this is going to get covered up. But I just want little amounts of color in here and there. A little patchy color is going to be fine. I don't want it all exactly the same, so. And just random. And that's probably good enough. Let me grab my original here. All right. Okay, so when you look at this, see how you can still see hints of color underneath? We will have to darken here under the beak afterwards, but we're going to be pulling like from the beak, and we're going to be pulling out and around and down. So from the eye, out and around and down. All right, so that's the direction that we're going to be pulling these feathers. And look at how I'm creating some tufts of feathers, so you can see the individual strokes here and there. If I just make it all too solid, I'm going to lose the dimension of his feathers. Now, the top of the head is actually a little flatter than what you think. And honestly, a real one might even be a sharper flatness than what I have it. And part of it depends on the angle that he's been photographed at. Sometimes I've seen them where their feathers are sticking out, where they've been ruffled. Okay, but if they're just sitting there still, they're actually very smooth. But if we make it too smooth, we lose the dimension in the picture. So I take a little bit of artistic license when I do this, so that I can see a little bit more of the feathers. Okay, all right. So we're gonna go and we're gonna use our white, and we'll thin it with some water, and we'll use our 1/4" rake brush. And I really like the Dynasty black silver rake brush. It's got a nice separation, a little bit stiffer bristle, so it really separates nice. Okay, so I want to get a nice combination. Okay, so now when I'm pulling, I'm going to pull from the beak little short tufts of hair. And I hold my brush a little bit at an angle. And what I mean by that, let me actually get another piece of paper here and show you. Let's see, where do I got paper at? Or let me just show you on here. I'm going to just show you what the color on here. Okay, so when you pull your rake brush, if you pull the whole flat, you get a wide. But if you tip it a little bit sideways, you can get thinner. Okay, so I'm pulling just little tufts, a little bit more, holding it a little bit more at an angle. So not quite such a wide line. Now, if I go totally chisel edge, I'm going to get a little thicker line. So you've got to get that right angle that you're going to get some little feathery tips. Okay. So we're just using white, and I'd rather do a couple layers than get too much all at once, because I want to see my color underneath showing through. So I'm pulling my strokes from the head, from the beak, and I'm going to be coming out and around. And down at the bottom, it's going to be all raggedy. It is not a nice, smooth, even. Some areas are longer than others. When you take a look at a picture of a real one, they're all going to be different. And I'm not going to do the final tips down there until after the body is done. I want to get the direction, but we'll refine those tips later with a liner brush and get some nice tips going. But for now, I want it kind of raggedy across that bottom.